welcome back to the class, everyone. Farming up a Galactic Legend is one of the most important and essential things you can do for your account. They're amazing in a variety of game modes, and what I really want to talk about and hone in on today is, after you've gone through the investment of this character and you take them into Grand Arena Championships, what is the best comp we can be using to get the best return on that investment? So the whole video is going to be structured around that. We're going to talk about the current 8 Galactic Legends in game and what are some of the best comps for them to run, whether they be primarily a defensive Galactic Legend, an offensive Galactic Legend, or in kind of the rare case of Jedi Master Kenobi actually being able to do both to great effect. So we're going to start off with the infamous Rey herself. And this one is, I'm really the most open to critiques or comments on, because Rey, as we've stated many times before, is not a resistance leader. She is a light side leader. You will not find anything relevant to resistance in the entirety of her kit. It's all light side, meaning she works with pretty much all of them. This being one of the most powerful comps right now that you can set out there on defense. It is giving virtually every relevant counter out there a ton of issues. And this is through a variety of means, but let's hone in a little bit on what Ben Solo is doing through his Omicrons. He's creating this really not fun dynamic, particularly for JML, having to constantly jug around both his health and Rey's health, because if you don't have it just right, you can't kill him. And even if you do get that right, he will come back, assuming you haven't insta-killed him, and JML really kind of struggles in that area. Cal Kestis is going to make this even worse, because not only is he adding on a nice 30% extra health to all of his unaligned Force user friends, which that is most of the team, by the way, he's also going to be giving a lot of health and protection recovery whenever they are critically hit, which, if you look at the Starkiller team with everything that they're giving out with the vulnerable, it's going to happen quite a lot. And then kind of as a cherry on top, just to really mess with things, we have added GK in here. And right now, between both his Foresight, his Cleanse, his Mass Assist, and the critical hit immunity, he is giving a ton of issues for most of Rey's relevant counters, the crit hit immunity being one of the biggest ones. If Rey at any point in the battle finds a way to cleanse herself, whether it be through using her basic, Jedi training Rey, calling her to assist and cleansing her, General Kenobi's mass cleanse that he has, if any of those really happen and she's inspired and the enemy team comes in and critically hits her, removes one of the stacks of inspired, she will then gain critical hit immunity and stop that team from continuing to remove the Inspire. So basically what's going to end up happening is her offense and mastery in general is just going to go through the roof, because not only will she be inspired, but on top of that, she is going to have critical hit immunity. And that process can kind of repeat again and again and again. So you kind of have to get everything perfectly set up in order for her not to be inspired and eventually just wreck your team, assuming you're using a team that uses turn meter, which really right now almost all the counters do, between Malicos, Starkiller, JML, etc. Next up, let's talk about C. Now, C is a lot simpler, and really there's not a whole lot going up around him. He is able to beat quite a few different teams out there. Some of the more pesky non-Galactic Legend teams like Traya, Savage, Seer Malicos, as well as Malgus. He's beating all of them. And really, for the most part, all he needs is our good friend Wat Tambor. And this is something, again, that most people already know, but it's important that we go over it, because what he's going to do is he's going to apply a very nice tech to our good friend Sith Eternal that is going to allow for a Dispel and a 30% protection regen. One of the reasons why this is so essential is because Sith Eternal is going to be taking all of the protection away from his enemies, specifically Jedi even more so, and then he's going to be able to regain all that protection as the battle goes on, both through his So Be It ability as well as through Wat. And then the Dispel on top of it is really nice, because nothing's worse than when you get Sith Eternal's ultimate finally unlocked, you're about to zap the whole team dead, and your ability blocked, and now you can't really do anything about it. And then, oh, Malgus, increase your cooldowns the next turn, and having the Dispel there really does help way through a lot of that. And then also, once you can't recover protection anymore because you've ulted, Wat will be able to kind of cover that end too. So ultimately making them a great offensive pair. Hopefully in a couple months from now, this chart will look very similar, except for we'll see Bane in the place of Wat so that he can go do the other 6 fun things he does with other teams. Next up is going to be Lord Vader. And this is probably the closest we're going to get to a super team. And by super team, I basically mean a team that cannibalizes several other good teams that are out there. When it comes to Lord Vader, you really do have to have Maul. He's essential for the very beginning of the battle so that you can get your ultimate, because he is an unaligned Force user, and when Lord Vader has unaligned Force users that take damage, he gains a significant amount of his ultimate charge, and Maul essentially does damage through himself through his own kit because of the debuff anguish he has. It's kind of a whole thing, but we don't really need to go into it. He gets a ton of ult that way, and then Maul also just causes a lot of other issues with increasing cooldowns and stuff like that. Now, the rest of the team are here just to cause a ton of issues. Obviously, if you add in Reva and Grand Inquisitor, you have to deal with everything they bring to the table. One of the most notable is the fact that Reva doesn't have to have a full team of Inquisitors, nor be in the leadership spot to apply her 2-turn locked healing immunity and defense down, which does mess with a ton of counters. And then we have Piet in here just for a little bit of extra insurance, so that if anyone tries to be a little bit funny with their Phoenix comp against Reva, he is going to gain turn meter, assuming he wasn't already dazed, and he can even daze them if they do not have the Rex Omicron. So again, not really a hard stop to Phoenix, but definitely adds one more RNG element to an already very RNG heavy counter when it comes to GAC, and ultimately just making it a pain for most of the counters that need to beat Lord Vader nowadays that are out there and trying their best to beat him. Next up is going to be Jedi Master Luke. This one also does have quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to team comp. This one right now is the one that's beating the majority of the Lord Vaders out there. I would argue that you want to really switch out Hermit Yoda and Cal Kestis for Grandmaster Yoda and Jolie if you're going up against a target like JMK, which is very relevant right now as the protection crons give Jedi Master Luke a ton of damage. But this pretty much just gives Jedi Master Luke everything he needs. His kit is obviously what it is. You get a nice 5-turn stun from Jedi Knight, or not 5-turn stun, 5-person stun from Jedi Knight Luke that cannot be resisted. Jedi Knight Revan adds an extra cleanse. The mark before you get your ultimate is also quite handy in several matches. Hoda is another cleanse, another healer, more damage. And then Cal Kestis really does add a lot to the team, particularly in the Lord Vader fight. The fact that he is a character that cannot be ability blocked and is able to get a cleanse for the whole team every other turn is very nice, especially when Lord Vader puts out his locked ability block that kind of hinders most of your team. He also has an insta-kill and does, 6 or 7 other cool things. But for the most part, that is the best Jedi comp that you can be using right now, specifically on offense. I still don't like him on defense. I've even seen this comp out there on defense get beat by General Grievous just because it doesn't really have a lot of insurance and ways to bail itself out. Next up is going to be another defensive comp, and that is going to be our good friend Jabba. This is the one that's honestly really boring. There's almost no variation right now to the Hutt Cartel team. This is the best defensive comp overall. It's been this way for pretty much ever since he come out. I guess it's probably somewhat worth noting that if you swap out Skiff Guard for Boba, some of the counters move in some ways, but ultimately Skiff Guard does way more behind the scenes. It's important. A lot of people like to put in Boba there to stop Night Sisters, but even if you check GAC Insight with just this comp, Night Sisters is like a 2% counter. It's still very much a 2-shot, which at that point, I guess Boba could have the advantage there. But overall, this is the best defensive comp just because it was specifically built to do so. Next up is going to be JMK. As previously mentioned, he is more in the flex area. You can use him very well on offense or very well on defense, depending on what your opponent is going to be bringing against you. And the only thing that I think is really noteworthy that a lot of people might not necessarily be doing is bringing in Mace. A lot of people are still using General Kenobi, and he's good for the comp, but if we're using him with Rey or maybe with Qui-Gon Jinn, as kind of previously suggested here, then Mace does add quite a bit to the team. Number one, he has an ability block in his own turn, which he can use against, Galactic Legend and light side characters and whatnot. And he also counters, and the counter becomes particularly annoying because the way that JMK's kit is set up is whenever there is an attack at a turn, which a counter is, you call the weakest light side ally to assist. So what routinely happens with a ton of counters is you go in, you use an AoE, Mace counters, that's already annoying. Even more annoying, he is going to call on Ahsoka because she's typically the weakest, and she is going to then dispel all buffs on that character, and as well dispel on herself and another Galactic Republic character. This has been very annoying for me. I've gone in with JML against this comp before. Use the AoE ability block. It's awesome. I ability block everyone. We get breach on everyone. Mace counters. Ahsoka goes next. She cleanses JMK, and the whole thing's a huge mess. You can still win, but it adds a whole nother layer of complexity to the team. Padme is just kind of there so that your attacks at a turn don't do nearly as much damage, and the 2 Ahsokas are essential to pretty much any JMK comp out there, offensively or defensively. Oh, the other thing that Mace does that's really nice on offense is he makes it pretty easy to get through a lot of the tankier characters because his Shatter Point will eventually reduce their max health and defense to almost nothing. That's It's more relevant in 3v3 when he gets more turns, but overall it's still there. Next up is going to be SLKR. And we're kind of just showing off the normal first order team here. And the caveat to this is he gets pretty bad bears against most things he fights. That being said, when Datacrons aren't doing the things that they do, he does beat quite a few different squads out there. Jabba and Rey probably being the main two, Lord Vader adding on to that. He will need a very different comp for Lord Vader, one actually involving Watt that we're already kind of using elsewhere. The one thing I will say is the healthier you can make SLKR, through his modding, getting him up to kind of absurd, disgusting numbers, the thinner you can go on this team. I've typically been taking in just these 4 in my GAC matches, and it's been working quite well, because at the end of the day, SLKR is the only one coming out anyway. So as long as he gets the mastery he needs, he's going to be doing a ton of damage, has a ton of health steal on his kit, and can just ultimately whack the enemy team. And last, and certainly not least, is going to be the defensive comp of Leia. And I really do believe that she is going to have some place on the defensive map even after her Datacron goes away. If we look at a lot of the statistics in GAC Insight, even without it, the team is holding across most of the other teams. And, you know, that is going to vary on what Datacrons they get and whatnot, but overall, it's still very valid. And I do really like having both Baze and Old Ben in here. Old Ben has some pretty obvious synergies with Leia with the amount of defense she's giving to Jedi Rebel allies. And the other thing I really like about Baze, number one, he's a pre-taunt. That's pretty cool. But one part of his kit that has aged very well, specifically if your opponent is trying to use Jedi versus Rey, is he is going to gain 5% turn meter whenever an enemy gains a buff. And then he's also going to have an AoE buff dispel. Jedi love their buffs. It almost doesn't matter what comp you're using with Jedi Master Luke, he is going to end up getting a ton of buffs, whether it be Hoda, Grandmaster Yoda, or any of the other ones, because he just has a bunch of buffs naturally built into his kit, and Baze constantly keeps interrupting those turns, constantly keeps dispelling, and is overall, like we said, just pretty annoying. And then again, you can add some extra coverage if you're using the team on offense, which I guess we're kind of talking about defense right now. You can even smoke screen Baze for some added coverage, because if he dies, it's not as big as them going really hard after your Leia and keeping that master reduction from happening. So that is going to be our video on all the current GL comps and how to use them. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And I guess it's worth noticing or mentioning that if you don't want to use the really expensive Lord Vader comp, probably throw a Ninth Sister and maybe Royal Guard in there so you can keep your Inquisitors doing something else. But thank you guys for watching. Until next time, stay awesome.